Right. Well, thank you so much, Madison, for joining me. Um,
Oh, my honor. My pleasure.
I'm really excited about our meeting today. Um, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Sorry, I'm a little distraught because trying to connect to YouTube, etc. It's distracted me a little bit, but I am excited. We are ready to, uh, we're ready to go. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself. I'll do a small interview. Madison is an Ayurvedic doctor and way more. I met Madison at Pacific Ayurveda in Calabasas a few years ago, and I fell in love with her work. I did panchakarma with her, Ayurvedic massage, and I've also done readings at the office, health readings based on based on. Oh, my cousin just came on, so I think he's able to see us. So now we're live on Facebook, and just wanted to. Now it's your turn. I'm gonna throw this to you and ask you to give us what I missed about
Sure.
yourself.
I'll do my best. Um, Hi, everybody. I'm Madison Madden. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor. I'm a yoga teacher, a movement specialist, and um, my passion in life is to help people go through transformational health experiences and help guide and support people in their process of learning how to really heal themselves. That's the empowerment of the healer on the inside and learning to use lifestyle and the inward introspective journey to learn the self and to heal. I had my own intensive healing process that led me to where I am today, led me to Ayurveda, led me to yoga, and healed, things in my body and my mind that, thought were unhealable. And so we're here today to talk about the divine feminine and
Yes.
its relationship to all sorts of things, from the body and health to our social and environmental and political environment and what's going on today.
I'm so excited to have you on because, for myself, I've always had questions. And I think I don't know about your mother, but for my mom, she came from the feminism era
Mm-hmm.
and women had to work hard. And, you know, it was more acceptable for mothers to be working and children were being brought up by other people, family, if you had in the area, or nannies, or just school system.
Sure.
And it was pretty rough because as a kid, my mom was a housewife. But when we moved to the States, she had to work.
Yep.
So I became mother to my brothers because I was the eldest. I was 13. I had to learn how to cook. I had to pick up my brothers after school. Just overnight, I became a mom and I didn't know what I was doing. So and I was also from the mindset of working and being in the workforce. And through personal experience, I had that duality. I loved working outside the home, but I also, when I had my daughter, I wanted to stay home with her. But I felt guilty. I felt like society did not accept me. And especially for me, I had studied at several degrees and I had work experience and knowledge in management. So for people, it was weird that I decided to stay home. And I definitely felt several backlashes. And so that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about modern women
Mm-hmm.
and how I feel some people may hate me, that feminism kind of threw us backwards or forward in a way that we are so misaligned
Yep.
with who we are as women, and there's so much confusion out there. And so I'm going to throw it back to you and have you, I know you're so knowledgeable. I'm so excited for you to share with the rest of the ladies.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much there. We could talk about it for days.
Hmm.
Uh, there are, where should we start with this? Well, feminism, it was in some ways successful because it brought the, female equality to the forefront of, social justice, and, made women aware of their, lack of equality, made men aware of the lack of equality, brought that voice to the forefront. Where it takes us today in many ways is women trying to fit themselves into a patriarchal paradigm that is challenging to do, or near impossible to do, and also sets up a unfortunate dynamic in which didn't really lead to real equality, and also there's still a war of the genders, right? Right now, the hot topic or the hot feminist movement right now is the Me Too movement.
True.
And the Me Too movement, while there's a lot of validity to it, in a lot of ways, also perpetuates the dynamic of, and I may get a lot of backlash for this being public, but the Me Too movement sets up a continued dynamic of the feminine victim and the male perpetrator.
Definitely was. I agree.
And that paradigm
that creates separation between it's him versus her.
Absolutely.
And that's not what we want.
Absolutely. And
we want to create unity.
Exactly. And when you asked me to talk about the divine feminine, and I'm, reflecting on, okay, how should we bring this? What's really the essence of this that we should be talking about? To me, the divine feminine is one's true belief and ability to really know that one is the creator. The feminine is the feminine quality. So you've got the polarity of the masculine and the feminine. And all traditional cultures and philosophies talk about it, right? You've got the yin, the yang. You've got the Shiva, Shakti. You've got all these different examples of the female-male polarity. And the feminine polarity is the creator. It's the womb. It's what births things into creation, right? And
Yes.
so the creator, the ability to take on the responsibility of being the creator and not being the victim or the passive participant in one's life, to me is the essence of what it means to be in touch with your own divine feminine. Beautiful. And so while justice and accountability and all those things are important, what's more important is the self-empowerment. Is the self-empowerment to know and to say, I'm the creator of my life. And maybe as a child, I wasn't. I didn't have control over my environment. I may have been abused. I may have been neglected. I may have been traumatized. In fact, almost everybody was in some way, shape, or form. But now as an adult, I have the power to recreate, re-sculpt my reality to be the creator of it, to take responsibility for it. And to me, that's the essence of it. So we all have to be careful with these social movements, the feminist movement, the Me Too movement, on and on and on. Now, the movements are great, getting people out on the street and, bringing things into a transparent light and bringing people together and all those things. But we have to make sure that it doesn't recreate divisive separation.
That's exactly my point. Because we are all one. I believe in unity consciousness. And one of the things, we do have to be aware of the issues that are causing hurt or to women. But at the same time, we don't want to say, okay, the perpetrator was not at fault. We don't want to say that. But at the same time, I like what you said about victimhood. At the same time, we don't want to victimize ourselves as women, especially as powerful as we are. And I think what needs to happen, instead of those movements are great to bring light into what they are, the issue at hand, but what would be the answer? Like would women empowerment, and what would that entail? Like, how can we educate ourselves and others?
Well, it's a really hard one, because lying in the subconscious of most of us as women is a submissive complex, is a victim complex.
Mm.
And because it's in the subconscious of us because of the culture that we were born into.
Yeah.
We've been born into a patriarchal paradigm, and it doesn't just affect us, it affects men too.
True.
The patriarchal paradigm affects men too. And we don't like to talk about that. We don't like to talk about how the social paradigm in which we're living in affects all people. Yes. And that we all have the responsibility to reflect on ourselves and how we're co-creating it and how we're responding to it. And so, you talked about the decision to become a mother and what that does. That's something that a lot of women face. And a lot of women just have children because it's kind of what you do. It's kind of what you're expected to do. Sometimes people don't even think about it, right?
They don't even, but they do it because it's what's expected, marriage and then
exactly.
But I was old enough to make a decision. I really wanted a child. I waited 5 years and I decided I wanted a child. And so what I did, I wanted to stay home. I didn't want her to have the personality of the nanny. I wanted to instill in her my values, my family values, and what I was brought up with, which meant I had to stay home. And there's enough value that,
do I want to do that fully, or do I want to have a career fully? Yeah. And if I don't do either, I'm probably not going to be satisfied with either one. So how do I do that? And so in that, you're a creator. You take that as a choice and you commit to it, no matter what the consequences of it are. Yeah. And that's what we all need to do. We all need to recognize that in every moment we are making choices. And those choices all have consequences. They, have consequences of the way we're perceived, the way that, others think about us, the way that we're going to be talked about, the way that all those things. But ultimately, every choice we make is ours. And that creates the reality that we live in. And we're all co-creating this. One of the things recently that I've been looking at is, there's this ongoing cycle that's created in spiritual communities. Wow. That keeps happening. It's right now, it's present with the 3HO, the Kundalini Yoga community, where Yogi Bhajan is being, brought to light of some of the sexual things that went on with some of his students and things like that. And that dynamic is very easy to take as, oh, that happens, and the same thing happened in that male perpetrator and nothing he said can ever be trusted and all of those things. Mm. But it's this ongoing cyclical thing that keeps happening in spiritual communities. Mm. And there's hundreds, if not thousands of people that are participating in that dynamic, not just him. Yeah. And so what is it that is helping to create that? How am I as part of that community? How is someone else? How are the women that were a part of that creation? What was it in them that was creating that dynamic? And what is in them now that needs to be healed from it, that needs to take ownership of it? Because the only way to really heal is to take responsibility and to take ownership for the experience that you're having. To confront the fears, to confront the challenge, to really bring forward your creative impulse, to, all those things. You have to get really honest with yourself. And so to me, that's what's important, Anahita, about all of this, about the divine feminine is, okay, this real true understanding of I am the creator of my life. I am not victim to anything. I am not passive to anything. I may be affected by the world around me, but it's my choice how I respond to it. And now that makes me
how we are powerful. Our response gives us the power to choose.
Absolutely. And that literally makes me a goddess, because I get to, everything around me is my creation. So the mirror that's reflecting back to me is reflecting back me, and I created it. That's pretty powerful. So when you take that in and you look maybe even at things that you're unsatisfied with, that create pain, that create discomfort, and you look at it and you say, okay, I created that. True. Why did I create that? There's something in me that wanted to create that. That makes me pretty darn powerful. Wow. And if I'm that powerful
in my own hands, so yeah.
What is it that I actually want to be creating? What does my consciousness want to be creating?
it's like finally you get to live the life you desire. And I think it's hard because of habit. One of the things I learned when I did Vipassana, I did a 10-day Vipassana last summer. And, they told us, oh, on the 6th day, you're going to be really scared. And I was. On the 6th day, I was so fearful of, because we had no one to talk to. We couldn't even read books or write down anything, our thoughts. So what made made me do is see myself clearly in the mirror for the first time, and I didn't like what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was a combination of all my habits, and I did not like it. And what I did instead, the first step, instead of looking at myself and try to heal myself or work it out with myself, I saw my teachers, the gurus, as horrible aliens. I know it sounds ridiculous. And I was like, wow, I'm pretty crazy. And that's how intense Vipassana is. You meditate 8 hours a day. And then on the 6th day, I just wanted to run away. It was easier for me to run off. And I hadn't driven there. So, and they make these places away from the city on purpose because most people want to run away. And I had driven there by someone else. So I didn't have keys. My purse was in the locker. They take all your keys, all your valuables. So you can't even sell your items to get out of town. And so you have to stay there and face yourself. And it took me 2-3 days to finally, I didn't even want to talk to the teacher. We were allowed to talk to the teacher. I finally talked to the teacher on the 7th or 8th day, like 2 days later. And then I had to face it. And I realized, wow, I've got work to do. And I think a lot of it is socialization, what we've been taught in school, parents, and I don't think everybody is bad. I'm not blaming people. I'm just saying this is how we are raised. And one of the ways we are raised is that we're raised in the city, and we're so, we've lost touch with nature. And I think nature is our best and, biggest teacher. And that's one of the things we are missing in modern life. And I feel like switching that, or maybe the next generation, teaching our children how to be more in touch with nature, how to be more intuitive. Because I think the answers are in us. So how do we go inside and see the answer, so you don't get to where I am now, where on the 6th day of Vipassana, I just want to run off instead of work on me.
Well, that's what I love about the science of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the study of nature. It's the study of nature's rhythms. And the essence of it is that the closer you can create your life in rhythm with nature, the healthier you're going to be. The rhythm of your life in nature with your nature. And everybody's nature is unique. The relationship with your nature to the larger nature is, and so we've all got this microcosm in us of this macrocosm in nature, right? We're made of the same elements, we're made of the same rhythms, and we're made of, all those things. And so the more you study and relate to nature, then the more you understand yourself, and vice versa. And so it's this kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but in India, they have this symbol or this altar piece. It's this brass double-sided arrow.
Okay, I think I've seen it, yeah.
It represents, if you point it inward and outward, it represents how it's the same. So instead of just pointing the arrow outward and saying, it's the external, it's your fault, it's that, right? It's like, okay.
Also pointing at you. So you're part of the problem or the good things that happen, both.
Exactly, pointed inward. And so the more that we get to know ourselves, which is a very challenging and courageous process, the more empathy and compassion we can have for others. I don't know if you ever heard the story of the man who did the Ho'oponopono?
Yes. No, go ahead. Yeah. Was it the doctor?
The doctor.
30 days. Yes, I love that. You can tell the story for
The story's beautiful. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but he was a doctor that was the doctor in prison. And he did a Hawaiian ceremony called Ho'oponopono. which is a ceremony that the traditional Hawaiian culture used as a conflict resolution within villages and communities. And it wasn't just a personal thing, it was something that community came together and did. And he used this ceremony to basically go through, he didn't even talk to the inmates. He did it really just within himself with the papers of the inmates, their cases. And he would do this ceremony of Ho'oponopono, which was basically, I love you, please forgive me, I love you, please forgive me. I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. I'm sorry. And
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Yeah. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
And I love you. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that,
I think the prisoners just healed over the course of a year, and he never had to see them.
Yeah. The prisoners healed, exactly. And because it instilled this sense of empathy and compassion, he saw himself in the prisoners. And so in the traditional Hawaiian culture, then there was a conflict, or say there was a juvenile that stole a car or something like that. Instead of putting someone in prison, then they would come together and they would do this ceremony. And each person would go around and they would do this, not just say the words, but go through the practice of it, of seeing how they contributed to the life of this person that committed this crime, how it was a communal quality that created
this teenager, basically. Exactly. How did we fail him or her, and how do we rectify it? Not say he's the bad guy, he goes to jail.
Exactly. And so you look at our culture and how opposite that is, right? You look at what we put everybody in prison.
Yeah.
We put the perpetrator in prison. We shun him or her, right?
One of the things that I've been lucky enough to be a part of is because I was born in Iran, not specifically from the capital city, but I was in a small town, Ahvaz, near the Gulf. Another part of it is that I come from a very old traditional background, where my great-great-grandparents were sheep herders, and they took care of the land. We have our own dialect and our own culture. And the culture is very dependent upon each other. The women, the children, the men, everybody has a role. Even the dogs, everybody has a role in this community. And coming from that background, we also have traditions kind of like the Hawaiians. We have our dance. I have to show it to you sometime. It's very ancient tradition. Some of the first instruments were created by my ancestry. They have the drum and it's like a flute or like an air instrument. And we have our dances, and everyone is really connected, and to a point where if like your brothers, like for men, like let's say for example, if someone's brothers dies and he's married and he has kids, the other brother takes the entire family in and takes care of the wife and the children, because back then women didn't work, and so the whole community takes care of each other, and it's such a beautiful community. And I grew up in that, and that's how my parents were. And then they kind of carried that, even though we lived in the city. My grandparents lived in the city, but that culture was embedded in them so deeply that we lived like that. When my grandfather passed, my dad was the second oldest, but he was the most responsible. He had a large family, brothers and sisters. He and my mother took in everybody. My dad had 9 siblings. Few were older and married, but the younger ones, some of them were the same age as my mom, but they moved in and we became one. So when I was born into, my uncles and aunts were like they were teenagers. They were like my brothers and sisters. And I grew up with that. I grew up with so much love. And, I feel so lucky that I grew up. So I feel like I'm very connected to the earth, in that, our culture is really, they lived off of their land. So that connection to the earth carried on. And I try to live that here in the US, and I always felt weird or different, or I didn't fit in somehow, because I couldn't talk about it because I was weird if I if I wanted to share everything with someone, I'm weird because I should hoard it. I should keep it for me. You know, that was the opposite of how I was raised.
Well, that's what we often refer to as the Eastern thought, the Eastern
Yeah.
world. And the Western way
Individualistic,
is much
Western
more,
way
yeah, it's
is so
more
individualistic.
individualistic.
And I don't think that's congruent with humanity. What are your thoughts?
Well, look at humanity.
Huh?
Look at humanity. Look at what we're doing.
Exactly. Look at what's happening now.
So you can take it all the way to, you can see how the environment is collapsing very rapidly. That conversation started coming to the forefront before the pandemic happened and has been more or less, silenced in some ways since the pandemic happened. And then you've got the pandemic of what's going on with that. And they're very connected in their causal factors. You look at the dietary habits of the earth. You look at the stress habits of the earth, of humanity. You look at the separation. You look at wars. You look at the way money and power and domination is the ultimately the inspiring factor for the Western world. And not only is it in the
And if
West,
you're not like that, this is what I see. If I'm not like that, I'm weird. If I want to share, I'm odd.
sure. Well, you're weird because because when you're born in the West, that's the normal, and you're bred to think you need to grow up and make money, and so anything other than that is weird. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that feel that way. And so there's a sense of, you also have to take a sense of responsibility in that too, like, okay, I'm going against the grain, and I'm going to take it upon myself to find other people that are going against the grain too, because going against the grain is the only way that we have any shot at ultimately changing humanity. Because the way that it's going right now, we're literally killing ourselves. We're in the sixth mass extinction right now, literally.
Yeah, it's scary, and that's what I see, and I'm I pick up, and it scares me, and it's like, how do I let the other person that I care about, that's living like the Western way, how do I get them to see it the correct way? Or how do I get them, I'm not being weird, and like you said, then I look for people like yourselves that are going against the grain, that are teaching others about the truth of nature. And I think it has to do with foundation. I have the foundation, but most people don't. And how did you get here? Because you were born here. You were your foundation should be individualistic and looking out for you and making money and not caring about others.
Well, to a certain degree it is.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, I have to fight that within myself.
Yeah.
I grew up and I didn't like that. I didn't want that. I was sick by the time I was 2 years old. By the time I was 7, I was an insomniac because everything around me just looked like
so young. You were so intuitive.
I was very discontent with the environment in which I was experiencing the world. And I remember having conversations with myself as a really small child. Like, I'd wake up from a sleep and be like, that felt like more like real truth than I'm awake. And this just feels like ridiculous. This just feels like, and so, but then as I started to socialize, as I became a teenager and started to want to fit in and be sexually attractive, and I had the pressure of starting to create a career and things like that, right? I started to deny those creative impulses that were there as a
naturally to
young person. Yeah. And so then I started to make choices that were along in the box, right? And then I had to, and I continue to. It's not a 100% process. It's a continual peeling of that onion for me, where I have to continue to see, oh wow, I sacrificed that part of me in order to fit in the mold. Oh, I have okay, that's not me, this is me. Oh, I know that that's true, but, you know, this is how I was brought up.
This is what's expected of me.
This is what's expected of me. And
That,
so there's a lot in there. There's a whole onion in there that, you know, I continue to peel, and I just keep hanging in there. I keep on the path to say, okay, nope, I'm gonna stay on this path. And there's times that it's really hard, and there's times that it's really scary, and, you know, all that. And there's times that there's a lot of pressure, and, you know, all that stuff. But ultimately, that's my commitment to myself is, okay, I know that I'm not perfect at it, but I'm gonna stay on that path. And we, you know, it's becoming a Ayurvedic doctor. You know, I remember knowing as a child that I was a healer, you know, knowing I had these, you know, this power in my hands. But then, you know, how do you go to college
and heal people.
And heal people? So then
And still
it's
try
like, oh, then I'll go to medical school.
and
right.
And to pay. And you know what I mean? Like, we still can't deny our reality,
right.
You know, of bills and having to dress yourself, have a car, have, you know, place to live.
Right. So the yogic philosophy around that is that when you are in line with your truth and you are committed to it fearlessly, then your radiant body will attract to you everything that you need to fulfill your purpose. Yeah. And so it all comes back to that. All these same threads keep coming back to that. To me, is this fear thing, right? Because anybody, you look at even the things that we hate about, you know, a politician or an enemy or, you know, anything, we can look at it and say, you know, the reason why somebody is desiring power and control and domination is because they're afraid. Yeah. Because they're afraid. So they think that if they have power and control and domination, then they can control their environment and then they'll be loved. It's the same reason that, you know, that's a very typical male story, right? Masculine story. But the same is true for the feminine. The same is true for the passivity and the victim complex. It's, you know, if I'm passive and I'm submissive, and I please you, then you'll love me. I'll be accepted. I'll be accepted by culture. I'll be accepted by daddy. I'll be accepted by mom. I'll be accepted by whatever it is, right? If I just fit myself into that. So ultimately, we're all playing the same game. And we have to see that in ourselves. We have to see that, oh, that little thread of that's in me is the same thread of it that's in XYZ politician that I hate. It's just that he has a bigger button. So it influences more people all at the same time.
Wow, that's really powerful.
And so you ask, you know, how do I influence people? You know, how do I influence people with these Eastern ways, right? That have this power, this, you know, the traditional wisdom. I'm a big proponent of traditional wisdom, and all, not just Iranian, but Indian, Native American, sure. African, all these native cultures all have this gem of wisdom that ultimately, if you look at them, are all very similar. They're very similar in the way that they prioritize.
That's the best.
They prioritize nature. They prioritize natural medicine. They prioritize community. They prioritize the arts. They prioritize all these things, and they have this whole, you know, language and tribal ways built around it that is more intuitive than it is built on the mind, right? And you look at things like the pyramids and all these, you know, crazy mysteries that even with the best modern science and thought process and math we still don't know how they do it, right? Because it was done through Ayurvedic medicine. You know, there's things that they were doing brain surgery 5,000 years ago. You know, modern medicine is catching up to Ayurveda now. It's not the other way around. We shouldn't be trying to prove that Ayurveda is worthy of being practiced. We should recognize that modern medicine is catching up to it. Yeah. And so,
it's folktale. They talk about ancient medicine, like herbal medicine, as if it's folktale, as if it doesn't matter, as if science goes beyond it. And now, due to metaphysics and laws of nature and manifestation, I think everybody's so into manifestation, and again, for the wrong reasons. We, because of power, like you said, go back to your last conversation of power and wanting to be loved, and if I'm powerful, I'm loved. So it comes from there. But again, it's leading us back to the ancient times of unity consciousness, and that what you just said of the perfection in Ayurveda, of the perfection or of herbal medicine. And I've gotten into Reiki, and I've gotten into and one of the things I picked up, I spend the day in my friend's garden. Now I don't know the name of the plant, but if I have a client come in for Reiki, I know which plant to give them as a tea. I make a tea, I give it to them, and then I know the name of the plant. I go look it up, and then after Reiki, I find out they had a specific issue, and that plant was congruent to it. So, and I don't think I'm special or I'm different. I think we all have that intuition. And my goal is, I had a reading with Joe and Ben from your office, and I recommend that to everyone who comes to me to do Reiki. And I highly recommend it. What you do is you take the birth date, birth city and country, and the time of birth, and you come up with sort of the health, the person's health. Can you explain about how that works?
Yeah, it was a Jyotish, or a Vedic astrology chart.
Vedic astrology, Ben and Joe did that for me.
Your yogic numerology, which is based on your birthday.
Yes, and that
put together helped create a picture of where you are, and from your strengths and weaknesses, and what you came in with karmically, and where what direction would support you right now in your health and in your well-being and in your spiritual growth.
Yes, mine was, I guess my job here on this time on earth was I'm an intuitive, and I'm here to teach intuition to the rest of the world. And I feel like so lucky to have finally found my niche with this channel. And then my job is to interview other people that I know that are doing so, making a difference, such as yourself, and the company you are a part of, Pacific Ayurveda, and everything you guys do. And I know several people like yourself, and I feel like I'm here to make others aware of it, and I'm here to make sure people have access. One of the things, unfortunately, that's going on now is modern medicine is highly valued, and what you guys do, what herbal medicines do, and ancient practices are not as revered, or like hokey pokey, they're seen like that. But modern medicine couldn't help me when I was ill, and I feel like you guys helped me. And so that's why I want to talk about it. That's why I want others to know, if they have a deadly illness, or their doctors tell them they're going to die, they're not going to die. They can choose to live. And
we can bring it back a couple notches back to the control and domination, and that desire in someone that's based in fear. So is disease. If you take even the root word disease, it breaks down to dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a dis-ease in the body that needs to be addressed. And the body is just an expression of the mind, expression of the patterns of the mind and the patterns of the spirit, right? So the way you asked earlier, how do I make change? How do I, and the way that, the only thing that I can come up with is that you speak to the heart. Mm-hmm. You inspire someone to start that journey. You inspire someone to start to feel their greatness, their creativity, their intuitive capacity, their desire to come together. One of the things that we've recognized is that almost every disease in some way, shape, or form comes back to isolation or loneliness.
Which is happening now.
Exactly. We're in a pandemic where there's
Crazy. I didn't know that. So all disease comes from loneliness and.
a lot of it. You look at most chronic disease, and there is a relationship to what we call the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
The vagus nerve is a nerve channel that runs from the brainstem down through the heart, lungs, and all the major organs. And it's kind of like the superhighway between the gut and the brain.
Okay.
And it's what responded to trauma early on. And
Yeah.
it's what makes someone feel either safe or feel threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And it responds to those cues. And so when someone feels safe in the world, then they tend to have a very toned vagus nerve. And then their more sympathetic nervous system function better. And I'm sorry, their parasympathetic nervous system functions better. And those functions are what create good health, is the ability to healthfully transition between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, which are the body's fight or flight response and the rest and digest response. And this is a really important thing when it comes to all health and really all well-being, because we have this completely backwards in our modern day. So I'm going to do a quick overview of this because okay, so you have your parasympathetic nervous system. This is what we should all be spending most of our time in.
Probably 95% of our time.
More or less, yeah. So you've got it should be home base, let's say it that way. It should be where you're residing in most of the time until you need to create kind of intense activity, or until you need to participate in some sort of confrontation or drive a car or something like that, where you need to engage your sympathetic nervous system. So this should be home base. And it's what regulates your heart rate, your body temperature, your biorhythms, all these things that ultimately, when functioning correctly, create good health, circulation, blood pressure, all these things. Now that's your parasympathetic. Mm-hmm. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight, flight, or freeze response. And your fight, flight, or freeze response is there for you under threatened situations.
Okay.
It's there to be utilized. And what it does is it stimulates adrenaline and this whole cocktail of hormones to make you run fast, think fast, and make decisions like fight, flight, or freeze, whatever is most beneficial to you. And most of us learn that way early on in our childhood. What was our best survival technique? For some people, that was fighting. For other people, that was flighting. For other people, that was freezing. For me, I alternated between freeze and flight. And freeze is the most harmful one, because in freeze, it's this whole nervous system response that actually goes back to evolution, our human evolution from reptiles. It's a reptilian response, and it actually starts to shut down our body. It can actually create death. It's actually extremely harmful to the body. But it's a survival mechanism that some people learn as children, or whenever the trauma happened to them. And so, but this response is a natural response, but most people are living in it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Close to it. And so there's this stress, this low to medium grade stress response that's driving our entire culture. It's driving our work culture. It's driving our travel culture. It's driving our economy. It's driving our social norms. It's driving everything, right? And then you go and go and you go and go in this fight or flight response, and you go get a massage. Yeah. You get into your parasympathetic nervous system, right? Yeah. And then you go right back, and I go get a massage, and I go back and I get
around 95% in fight or flight, and then 5%.
Exactly. And it should be
the other opposite.
And only here can you access your intuition. Mm-hmm. Because this is a fear response.
Yes.
And when you're in fear, you can't access your intuition. So you're not accessing the intuition of the earth. You're not accessing that greater intelligence that we all have access to, because you're in fear. So you're inevitably me focused. you're inevitably, your blinders are up. You're in the, oh, I need to protect myself mode.
Because it's everything, like, I think it has to do with the responsibilities that we have created for ourselves, you know, or the culture has created for us. And, you know, we're in a place where everything is getting more expensive. So you got to work more. You know, you can't see your kids. So the kids are being raised by someone else. At schools are getting longer. And, you know, now they're talking about even not having summers, you know, so how do we take our lives back? I feel like it's so scary. It's so, I don't know. I feel like it comes to a point where there's so much that needs to be done that we feel like, wow, we can't do anything, so we let go. I'll give you an analogy. Actually, you know this place. It's next. It's across the office you guys had in Calabasas. There's like in Calabasas there is a animal farm. And I usually like going, you know, when I go out there to eat, I like to walk and go check out the animals. And then so I walked and I saw these huge, what are those, the cows with the huge horns called?
Bulls?
Huh? No, the actual cow, the signal, they're the Texas, basically they're huge animals, and the fence is, and their horses there too, and the fence is this, you know, plywood, very thin, very thin wood. So this animal, I saw myself as that animal. This animal is capable of rushing through the fence, throwing it down and attacking me, killing me, but it's sitting there grazing. And one time, you know, when COVID happened, I saw myself as that cow, or us, humanity. We are these powerful beings made to believe that the square box around us is real. You know, and that's scary. At least, like, I'm aware of it, or you're aware of it.
But that doesn't make it the conundrum that you're presenting is that it's very hard to apply that wisdom to your life. Mm-hmm. It's very hard. It's very challenging. And
exactly.
And we need each other to help remind each other of that, remind ourselves. We need to have the courage to take that into our everyday life. We need to have the courage to go against, you know, the stream and all of that. But ultimately, it does come back to that. It does come back to, okay, can I really remember that that's the truth? And can I base my decisions on that?
Yeah.
Can I choose something different? Can I, you know, do I have the courage to go against it so much that I might be shunned or, you know, that's what you look at any of the great leaders of the time. Most people, you know, most of them had the courage to really go so far against the grain.
Yeah. You know, he was shot, but his story still is around. Like Gandhi, you know, he changed the faith of an entire country that's more than 1 billion people. Right. And he did it without guns.
Right.
So it's not, yeah.
He wasn't perfect. He was human too. He knew his divinity, but he was a human and he had flaws. And, you know, there's people that talk about Gandhi and all of his flaws and all of his, you know, blah, 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 all those things. But ultimately what he did have was the courage to go against the social norm and to live in a way that was aligned with what he believed his integrity to be.
Yes. And I remember now the name of the cow, Longhorn. Anyway, I should know, being from Texas for some part of my life. So yeah, this is amazing. I think we talked about everything, but not too much on divine feminine.
It's all there. That's all the divine. To me, I think it is very relevant. And I think that the divine feminine is the, you know, we often talk about women rising, right? Women rising to power. And you look at the COVID response in the nations, you know, that have women leaders have had some of the best COVID responses.
Wow.
And there's not a coincidence there. There's and I'm not saying, I don't believe that women are better than men or anything like that, but there's a power imbalance, and there's an intuition and intuitive guidance that the feminine has that is very powerful when empowered. And so we have to, I kind of think of it as as these platforms. You've got the ego of the typical masculine is kind of a superiority, right? And the ego of the typical feminine is a inferiority, is a victim complex, and a domination complex, and a victim complex. And so what we need we need the surrendered male, and we need the empowered feminine. And then they can merge. And that's the yin and the yang. That's Shiva Shakti. That's all those, that's the essence of tantric. Tantric has been completely bastardized. The idea of tantra in the West.
And
it's just about sex, but that's not what tantra is. Tantra is the connection of the masculine and feminine, the merging of the polarities. And so the only way to do that is to right? And so that when you're talking about divine feminine, that is all in there, you know, it's the taking of responsibility. It's the removal of the victim complex. It's the breaking down of the illusion of the box. It's the willingness to go against the norm. It's the ability to see the microcosm in you as the macrocosm around you. It's the willingness to point the arrow inward instead of putting the blame outward. It's all of that are part of that same thing, so that we can rise and empower to something that's beyond just basically fear. And then hopefully have whatever agency we do to speak to the hearts of others to help other people empower that in them too.
That's wonderful. So beautifully said. It's been wonderful having you. I don't want to let go, but we're coming up on our hour. I can't believe the hour went so quickly. Any closing thoughts? Any suggestions as to how we can surrender and how we can come out of victimhood for women, and how women, and for men, you know, the need for power, how they can surrender a little more, and like you said, come down here and meet the women halfway. How could we do that? Meditation, awareness, like what are some suggestions?
Anything that you can do to get into your parasympathetic nervous system. So, you know, those tools are breath practices, yoga, eating, healthy eating practices, physical touch, eye contact, communication, to self-observation, to, you know, the process you went through with Vipassana. That's something that we all have the ability to do. We can witness ourselves every day in what we're doing. It's challenging, but we can do it. If you can make a commitment to yourself to, you know what, I'm not going to point the sword outward anymore. I'm no longer going to blame the people around me for the reality that I'm living in. You know, it may take me a little while to figure out how to do this, but I'm going to take responsibility for it. I'm responsible for my own empowerment. I can't wait for someone to do that for me. Anything that you can do to keep your system, make sure you're not rushing, make sure you're not eating on the go, make sure you're not stacking yourself too thin, catch yourself when you're trying to please someone, doing something that's against your own integrity for the pleasing of another, because ultimately that's your own ego agenda, right? So all of those things, they all circle around and they create this kind of cocktail of either health or disease, you know, fear or empowerment, and they're all very connected.
Wow. Yes, I like that. I was thinking of something. It's very powerful what you just said. One of the things I realized, you know, as a child or growing up, I was always told, when you want to make a difference in the world, begin with yourself. And I think everything you said just basically speaks to that. If we change ourselves, and I always wondered why, because I didn't know about metaphysics when I was younger, right? Why, if I change myself, how is that going to change others? And then because I was concerned, oh, but this person is stealing, but that person is rude, and that person just hit someone, and drove off, and all these things. And I was just, like you said, the arrow was out there and I wasn't looking in. And as an adult, when I learned about metaphysics, I learned if I work on me, I create a better person. I have a mother, I have a father, I have cousins, friends, people I'm connected with. And our auric field, that's what we don't see. So I learned if I work on me, if I meditate, if I go to Vipassana and endure that 10 days of basically barely eating, meditating 8 hours a day, and avoiding the fact that I wanted to run away and stay there and put up with what, looking in the mirror, I learned once that's going to improve my auric field. And I'm connected through my aura to everything around me, including nature, my home. And that's going to affect everyone around me to want to improve themselves. So that's something like people who are aware, I recommend that they look in and try to meditate more and live in their parasympathetic and relaxation. I learned from you guys to make a time for eating, have a specific time for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and not rush through it, and make time for it and actually sit down and enjoy. When we did Divine Feminine with you guys, you demonstrated a cookie. You're like, with the guilt and eating, you're like, no, don't eat it like that. Sit down and enjoy your cookie. Don't eat it with rush and guilt and I gotta look like Heidi Klum mentality.
Anything into a toxin.
Yeah.
A stressful state. Doesn't matter how nutritious it is.
Yes. And the wisdom is everywhere. Like that's seeing it in the Bible when I guess Jesus had thousands of people to feed and there was only 2 fish and 3 pieces of bread. I love that story. And then it didn't make sense as a kid, but as an adult, I look into all religion and wisdom, and as an adult, it makes sense. How did this small piece of, food able to nourish all these people? And that's where it comes from. I think it's trying to metaphorically say that anything can nourish you. It doesn't matter the amount, as long as you believe and you praise it and you see it as it belonging to all of us, not just you, not just hoarding. So whoever had those items, instead of saying, oh my God, we're not going to have food for a month, I'm going to hoard it and keep it to myself. But when they decided to share it, it expanded, it grew.
Yeah, the insecure woman is longing to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
and will do anything to make herself worthy of love.
Oh, wow.
The divine feminine knows that she deserves love and is love and has love to give.
It's seeing that abundance in yourself, the abundance, and even though it's not present in the physical world, being so connected to it that you see it, that it's coming or it's there. You don't necessarily have to see it or touch it. Yeah.
In Ayurveda, I'll end with one quick thing.
Go ahead.
In Ayurveda, the word for diet is ahara, A-H-A-R-A, ahara. And oftentimes we think of a diet as just meaning the food you eat. Oftentimes people think of it as calorie counting, right? I'm on a diet, I only eat 1,200 calories a day.
Yes.
But diet, or ahara in Ayurveda, means everything that you intake. It means the food that you eat, the drink that you drink,
right?
the perceptions that you take in, the air that you breathe. So your diet is all of those things, everything that's intaked. And then your health is dependent on how well you digest that. And so you can put the most nutritious thing in your body, but if you don't digest it and assimilate it and eliminate it correctly or, efficiently, then it will get stored in your body and it will create disease.
Wow. I love that. That's so profound. So how can people connect with you? Do you have a website you'd like to tell our audience, or a number, or how people can get a hold of you and use your wisdom?
Pacific Coast Ayurveda. We're in Gualala, California, which is about 3 hours north of San Francisco, right on the coast. And our website is P as in Paul, or Pacific, C as in Coast, Ayurveda, which is AYURVEDA.com. And our phone number is 707-225-8844. And you're welcome to connect with us anytime.
Yeah, and I will leave that information below in the comments. I'm so happy that we had this chance to talk about everything we talked about under the sun. I'm so happy that I know you, and I am in touch with Pacific Coast Ayurveda, and I'm excited to learn more from you guys. And I look forward to speaking with you, Joe, and Victor again soon. I mean, yourself again, but with them, I would love to have them on. I love all of your wisdom, and I feel like you guys have a lot to contribute. There's so much. It's like the iceberg. You could see the tip. There's so much under here, and there's so much wisdom, and I'd love to share it with everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and such an honor, and love you.
Love you always. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for accepting. Bye-bye.